Professor said. The deadliest species is gone. The human raised her hand. It's called Earth, ma'am, Professor said. The deadliest species is gone. The human raised her hand. It's called Earth, ma'am. The alarm screamed through the lecture hall as Professor Khalith's scales turned pale blue. The universal translator crackled with her panicked voice. Students from 40 different worlds scrambled for the exits, but Amanda Pierce stayed in her seat, fingers gripping her datapad as the emergency lights bathed everything in red. The massive view screen behind the professor flickered, showing a sector of space that had just gone dark. 17 colonies. Gone. No distress calls. No survivors. Just silence spreading like poison through the void. Khalith's four eyes locked onto Amanda, the only human in the advanced xenobiology course. The Vrexian professor's tentacles trembled as she fought to maintain composure. Around them, the panic subsided as security protocols kicked in, sealing the hall. The other students, those brave enough to stay, pressed against the walls. A Korathi youth chittered nervously, his exoskeleton clicking. Two Fenari twins huddled together, their fur standing on end. Amanda stood slowly, her boots echoing in the sudden quiet. She had seen this before. Not here, not in the safety of the Galactic Institute, but in the files her grandfather kept locked away. Files marked with Earth Defense Force codes that predated first contact by decades. Files that told a different story than the one the galaxy believed. The professor's voice shook as she pulled up historical data. Images of devastated worlds filled the screen. Planets stripped of life, entire ecosystems reduced to dust. And at the center of it all, a single notation that made every species in the known galaxy shudder. The Devourers. The Ancient Ones. The species that had consumed 100 civilizations before the current galactic community even learned to harness fire. They had vanished 3,000 years ago. Every species taught their young the same story. The Devourers had simply stopped. Their ships went silent. Their worlds went dark. The galaxy breathed again. Peace became possible. But nobody knew why they disappeared. Nobody knew what could stop them. The question haunted xenohistorians for millennia. Khalith manipulated the display with shaking tentacles. Archaeological evidence appeared. Devourer technology? Their genetic templates. Their last known coordinates before the silence. And then she made her announcement, the one that triggered the alarms, the one that sent ice through the veins of every species listening to the galactic news feeds. The dead zone spreading through Sector 7 matched Devourer patterns. Something had awakened them. Something had brought them back. Amanda raised her hand. The simple gesture seemed absurd in the chaos, but Khalith acknowledged her anyway, perhaps seeking comfort in routine, perhaps desperate for any contribution that might help. The professor's translator carried her words to every species present, each hearing it in their own language. What does humanity know of the Devourers, Miss Pierce? Amanda's jaw tightened. She thought of her grandfather's last words before he passed. She thought of the medals he kept hidden in a box, medals that bore no official recognition, no government seal. She thought of the nightmares that woke him screaming about things in the dark between stars, things with too many teeth, things that learned to fear. Her voice came out steady, cold, carrying the weight of a truth the galaxy had forgotten. You're asking the wrong question, Professor. You want to know what happened to the Devourers. You want to know why they vanished. You want to know what force in the universe could make the apex predators of known space simply stop existing. The lecture hall went absolutely silent. Even the emergency klaxons seemed to fade. Khalith's scales shifted through colors Amanda had never seen before. Fear, confusion, and something else. A dawning horror as the pieces began to connect in her brilliant mind. Amanda pulled out her datapad and transmitted a file to the main screen. Coordinates, dates, battle reports written in languages that predated the galactic standard by centuries. All of it marked with one location, all of it pointing to a single world that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive until 60 years ago. The professor's voice barely functioned. The translator struggled to process the emotional weight behind her words. What are you saying? Amanda met her eyes, all four of them, and delivered the truth that would reshape everything the galaxy thought they knew. The deadliest species in the universe isn't gone, Professor Khalith. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on every being in that room. It's called Earth, ma'am. And they're not extinct. You're looking at one. Part 2, the lecture hall remained frozen for 3 heartbeats. Then chaos erupted. The Cordy student launched himself through the nearest window, his survival instincts overriding the fact they were 15 floors up. His species had evolved to flee first and think later. The Fenari twins bolted for the emergency exits, their claws scraping against the polished floor. A Deltharian in the back row fainted, her crystalline body shattering against the ground in a way that would take days to regenerate. Amanda stayed exactly where she was, watching Professor Kelleth process the information with visible difficulty. The Vrexian's tentacles had gone completely rigid, a defense mechanism her species employed when facing existential threats. Her translator emitted a series of clicks and whistles that didn't translate to any known language, pure, primal fear sounds that transcended words. Security forces burst through the doors, their weapons drawn but uncertain. A squad leader, some species Amanda didn't recognize, with 6 arms and compound eyes, barked orders in the Galactic Standard. Nobody move. This facility is on lockdown. All students remain in your current positions. But Khalith raised one trembling tentacle. Let her speak. The words carried authority that even armed security couldn't ignore. The squad leader's weapons lowered fractionally, but every barrel remained pointed in Amanda's general direction. She could feel the targeting lasers dancing across her chest. Her heart rate didn't change. That was the thing about humans. They had been hunted by things far scarier than security forces with laser rifles. Amanda expanded the file on the main screen. The first image showed a planet. Not Earth, but somewhere else. Somewhere that bore the scars of Devourer occupation. The surface had been stripped to bedrock, oceans boiled away, atmosphere torn off and harvested for whatever incomprehensible purpose the Devourers required. Standard pattern. The galaxy had seen it 1,000 times in archaeological records, but the next image changed everything. It showed the same planet, but from a different angle, and there, visible against the dead world's surface, were ships, human ships. Not the sleek diplomatic vessels the galaxy had grown accustomed to seeing. Not the trade freighters that carried Earth goods to distant markets. These were warships. Brutal, angular things covered in weapons that didn't match any known galactic technology. And they were old. The timestamps predated first contact by 200 years. How is this possible? Khalith whispered. Humanity achieved faster than light travel only 60 years ago. Your species made first contact with the Deltharian Trade Federation in 2187. Before that, you were confined to your home system. Everyone knows this. It's documented, verified. Amanda's laugh carried no humor. That's the story Earth wanted you to believe. She pulled up more files. Combat footage. Grainy, corrupted, but unmistakable. Human soldiers in void armor fighting against creatures that made the lecture hall's occupants whimper. The Devourers in their full horror, 3 meters tall, exoskeletons that could shrug off plasma fire, claws that could rip through hull plating, acidic blood that ate through anything it touched, and those faces. Those terrible faces with too many eyes and mouths that split open in ways that violated sanity. The footage showed humans dying. Lots of them. But it also showed humans winning. Squad tactics that exploited every weakness. Weapons designed specifically to counter Devourer biology. And something else. Something that made every non-human in that room instinctively back away from Amanda. The humans in the footage weren't running. They weren't retreating. They were hunting. One clip showed a human soldier, her armor breached and bleeding from a dozen wounds, tackle a Devourer twice her size. She jammed an explosive device into its mouth and triggered it manually. The blast killed them both. But it also cleared a path for her squad to reach an evacuation point. 12 humans survived because of her sacrifice. The footage timestamp read 2104. 83 years before first contact, Amanda said quietly. The Battle of Kepler Station. We found it abandoned. The Devourers had been using it as a breeding facility. They were growing more of themselves, preparing for another wave of conquest. We couldn't let that stand. Professor Kelleth's scales had gone completely transparent, a Vrexian fear response so extreme that Amanda had only read about it in textbooks. The professor managed to force words through her translator. You fought them. Primitive humans with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons fought the Devourers. We didn't have a choice, Amanda replied. She pulled up another file. Earth's solar system. Timeline, 2087. The screen showed massive ships entering Earth's neighborhood. Devourer scouts. They had detected the radio signals humanity had been broadcasting for over a century. They came to investigate. They came to feed. The next series of images documented the war that followed. A war fought in complete secrecy. A war that every government on Earth united to hide from their populations. The truth would have caused global panic. Instead, they told people the massive construction projects were for asteroid mining. They said the new taxes funded climate research. They explained away the disappearances as normal statistical variation. But in reality, Earth was fighting for its survival. The Devourers sent 3 harvester fleets to the solar system. The first one made it to Mars before Earth's hastily constructed defense platforms destroyed it. The second reached Venus. The third almost touched Earth's atmosphere before nuclear mines and suicide ships brought it down. Amanda's voice carried the weight of inherited trauma. My great-grandmother was on one of those suicide ships. She was, 19 years old. A physics student who volunteered when they explained what was coming. She and 4,000 others flew directly into a Devourer mothership's engine core. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface. The government called it a solar flare. The lecture hall's remaining occupants stared at the screen in horror. The casualty numbers scrolled past. Millions dead. Entire orbital stations sacrificed. 3 lunar bases destroyed to prevent Devourer landings. And through it all, humanity kept fighting. Not with grace, not with honor, but with the desperate ferocity of a species that refused to be prey. But that doesn't explain. Khalith started, then stopped. Her mind was working through the implications. Her species was brilliant. That's why she held a position at the Galactic Institute, the timeline. The Devourers vanished 3,000 years ago. You're showing me battles from a century ago. Amanda nodded slowly. That's the part that gets interesting. She pulled up the final file. The one her grandfather made her swear never to reveal. The one that explained everything. Coordinates. A planet on the edge of explored space. Earth's military had tracked the Devourer scouts back to their source. They found the homeworld. Or what was left of it. The image showed a dead world, but not killed by the Devourers. Killed by something else. The planet's surface bore massive craters that no natural process could create. The atmosphere had been deliberately poisoned. Every city, every structure, every sign of Devourer civilization had been systematically erased, and in orbit around the dead world floated a single object, a monument. A warning, written in a language that predated human civilization by thousands of years, but that Earth's linguists had managed to partially translate. Professor Kelleth read the translation aloud, her voice barely functioning. Here lies the mistake. Here lies the species that learned too late. The predators thought themselves apex. They forgot that prey evolves. They forgot that survival breeds innovation. They forgot that the deadliest creatures are not those who hunt, but those who refuse to die. The next line made everyone in the room understand why the alarms were still screaming. This is not the first time. This will not be the last time. When predators rise, we will be waiting. We have always been waiting. We are the answer to the question that apex species never think to ask. What happens when prey becomes predator? Amanda's voice cut through the stunned silence. The Devourers didn't vanish 3,000 years ago. They were eliminated, wiped out so completely that the galaxy forgot they were mortal. And the species that did it left that monument as a warning to anyone who might follow the same path. She paused. We found evidence, archaeological remnants, genetic markers. The species that killed the Devourers were human ancestors, not Homo sapiens, something older. Something that went extinct before modern humans evolved. But their legacy remained, coded into human DNA. Written in genetic memory, the instinct to fight impossible odds. The ability to organize against existential threats, the willingness to sacrifice everything for species survival. The Devourers came to Earth expecting easy prey. They found something else entirely. They found the descendants of the only species in galactic history to completely eliminate an apex predator. Professor Khalith's translator finally gave up, unable to process the emotional complexity of her response. She switched to gesture, her tentacles forming shapes that conveyed a simple message. What does this mean for us now? Amanda looked at the screen showing the dead zone in Sector 7, the Devourer patterns, the spreading silence. She thought about the emergency broadcast that had triggered this entire conversation, and she told them the truth they needed to hear. It means Earth has been preparing for this day since the first Devourer scout entered our solar system. It means humanity's military is significantly more advanced than we've let the galaxy believe. It means those trade ships and diplomatic vessels you've been seeing for 60 years had a secondary purpose. We've been mapping every Devourer relic site, every dead world, every piece of their technology. She smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. It means the cavalry is already on its way. Part 3, the emergency broadcast, interrupted Amanda before she could continue. Every screen in the lecture hall switched to the Galactic News Network. The anchor, a Tellurian with bioluminescent skin patterns that flickered with barely controlled panic, announced that the dead zone in Sector 7 had expanded. 42 colonies now, over 3 billion sentients, gone in less than 6 hours. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what the long-range sensors had finally captured. Ships. Massive ones, emerging from the dead zone and moving toward populated space. The designs matched devourer patterns from ancient records, but these were larger, more advanced. 3,000 years of dormancy hadn't weakened them. It had given them time to evolve. Professor Kelleth turned to Amanda with all four eyes wide. "You said the cavalry was coming. How long?" Amanda checked her datapad. The screen showed a message her grandfather had programmed to send automatically if certain galactic events occurred. The message contained activation codes, coordinates, and a simple instruction: execute Protocol Lazarus. She looked up at the professor. "They've been in position for 20 years. They're already engaging." The Vrexian's tentacles formed a gesture of confusion. "What? Where?" "The sensors show nothing between the dead zone and the nearest inhabited systems. That's the point," Amanda replied. She pulled up a star map and highlighted 17 locations. Empty space. Supposedly. But her datapad showed different readings. Human stealth ships, each one the size of a small moon, positioned along every likely devourer approach vector. They had been sitting dark and silent for 2 decades, waiting for this exact scenario. The galactic newsfeed suddenly cut to static. Then a new image appeared. Grainy footage from a Deltharian merchant ship that happened to be at the edge of the dead zone. The crew had been running, trying to reach a jump point before the devourers caught them. They almost made it. The footage showed 3 devourer ships closing in. Each one was kilometers long. Their hull plating absorbed sensor sweeps. Their weapons charged with energy signatures that made the merchant ship's computers scream warnings. Then something else appeared on the screen, a ship that shouldn't exist. Angular. Brutal. Covered in weapons that didn't match any known galactic design. It materialized directly between the merchant ship and the devourers. No jump signature. No energy buildup. One moment empty space. The next, a human warship that made the devourer vessels look fragile. The lecture hall erupted in questions. How was that possible? What kind of technology? Where did that come from? Amanda watched the footage with grim satisfaction. That's the EDS Avalanche, Earth Defense Ship, designation Alpha 7. Built in lunar orbit using technology we've been developing since the first Devourer scout died above Mars. She paused as the footage showed what happened next. The Avalanche opened fire. The weapons weren't plasma, weren't lasers, weren't anything the galaxy recognized. They were kinetic. Massive tungsten rods accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. Simple. Primitive by galactic standards, but delivered with such precision and force that the first Devourer ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next, its atoms were scattered across 3 million kilometers of space. The second Devourer ship managed to return fire. Their weapons, the same ones that had harvested 100 civilizations, struck the Avalanche's hull. The energy discharge was enough to vaporize a continent. The human ship didn't even slow down. Its armor, layers of materials that Earth scientists had designed specifically to counter Devourer weapons, absorbed the blast. Then it killed the second ship with the same cold efficiency. The third Devourer vessel tried to run. It didn't make it. The Avalanche deployed something the footage could barely capture. Smaller ships, hundreds of them, each one piloted by a human who had trained their entire life for this moment. They swarmed the Devourer ship like antibodies attacking a virus. Precision strikes against weapon systems, against engines, against life support. Within minutes, the Devourer ship was drifting and dead. The merchant ship's crew could be heard on the audio feed, hysterical prayers in Deltharian, thanks to deities Amanda didn't recognize. And then the Avalanche hailed them. The voice was young, female, calm in a way that suggested this wasn't her first battle. "This is Commander Kate Murphy of Earth Defense Ship Avalanche. You're safe now. Proceed to your jump point. Additional civilian vessels should make for the nearest fortified system. Human forces are establishing a defense perimeter." The footage ended. The galactic news anchor's bioluminescence had gone completely dark, a Tellurian fear response. Her voice shook as she read the incoming reports. 7 more engagements. 7 more human victories. The Devourers were being stopped. No, not stopped. Hunted. Professor Kelleth turned to Amanda. Her scales had shifted to a color Amanda had never seen any Vrexian display. Something between awe and terror. How many ships does Earth have? Amanda considered lying, considered maintaining the fiction. But the truth was going to come out anyway. 347 combat-ready vessels. Another 200 in various stages of construction. We've been building them in deep space facilities beyond the edge of what the galaxy considers explored territory. Every human who went missing over the last 60 years, every colony ship that supposedly failed, every accident that was never quite explained. She met the professor's eyes. They were all volunteers for the defense fleet, people who understood what was coming, people who chose to stand between the Devourers and the rest of the galaxy. A Karathi student, one who hadn't fled in the initial panic, chittered a question that the translator struggled to render. Why? Why would humanity do this? You made first contact 60 years ago. Most of your species didn't even know the Devourers existed until today. Why prepare for a threat that might never return? Amanda pulled up another file. This one showed her its history. Not the sanitized version taught in schools. The real one. Millions of years of evolution. Species rising and falling. Extinction events that wiped out 90% of all life. Ice ages. Volcanic eruptions. Asteroid impacts. And through it all, humanity's ancestors survived. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the fastest, but because they prepared for the worst and hoped for the best. We learned early that the universe doesn't care about your hopes, Amanda said quietly. We learned that survival requires constant vigilance. When the first Devourer scout reached Earth, we thought we were doomed. Primitive weapons against an enemy that had consumed civilizations far more advanced than ours. But we fought anyway. And we won. Not easily, not cleanly. But we won. She paused. And then we asked ourselves the question that defined everything that came after. What if they come back? The lecture hall's remaining students listened in absolute silence. Even the security forces had lowered their weapons completely, caught up in the revelation. So we built the defense fleet, Amanda continued. We sent scientists to devour relic sites under the guise of archaeological missions. We studied their technology, their biology, their tactics. We found their weakness. And we exploited it. She smiled grimly. The Devourers are perfect killers, perfect predators. But perfection is brittle. It doesn't adapt. It doesn't innovate. It just does what it's always done. And humans? Professor Kelleth asked. We're survivors, Amanda replied. We adapt. We innovate. We learn from every mistake. The Devourers killed millions of us during their first attack. We made sure it would never happen again. Well, she pulled up tactical data showing the current battle lines. Human ships holding positions across 12 sectors. Devourer forces being contained. Being herded. Being eliminated with surgical precision. A message came through on Amanda's datapad. She read it quickly, then looked up at the professor. Earth Command is requesting cooperation from Galactic forces. They need civilian ships cleared from combat zones. They need sensor data from every available source. And they need the Galactic Institute's Xenobiology department to help identify Devourer variants. Khalith's tentacles formed a gesture of agreement so emphatic it was almost violent. Anything. Everything. Tell Earth Command they have full cooperation. She paused. And, Miss Pierce, tell them thank you? For preparing. For standing ready. For being what the galaxy needed even when we didn't know we needed it. Amanda nodded and began transmitting coordinates and data packages. But inside, she thought about her grandfather. About the nightmares. About the soldiers who died in darkness so the rest of humanity could live in light. About the species that learned the hard way that survival wasn't a right. It was a responsibility. The news feed showed another engagement. Another human victory. The Devourers were being pushed back. The dead zone was stabilizing. And across the galaxy, species that had lived in peace for 3,000 years were learning the truth. The deadliest species wasn't gone. It had just been waiting. Outside the lecture hall, alarms continued to scream. But inside, for the first time since the crisis began, there was hope. Not because the danger had passed, but because someone had been ready for it. Because when the galaxy needed defenders, humanity had answered the call they hadn't even known to make. Part 4. 3 days after the initial Devourer emergence, Amanda found herself in the Galactic Institute's war room. The term war room was generous. It was actually a converted cafeteria with hastily installed holographic projectors and communication arrays. But it served its purpose. Representatives from 40 species crowded around displays showing the tactical situation. And for the first time in galactic history, they were taking orders from humans. Commander Kate Murphy's face filled the primary screen. She looked exhausted. 3 days of constant combat would do that. But her voice remained steady as she briefed the assembled dignitaries. Devourer forces are contained in sectors 7 through 19. We've eliminated 40% of their combat vessels, but they're adapting faster than our projections anticipated. They're using tactics we haven't seen in any historical records. A Fenari ambassador, his fur streaked with stress-induced patterns, interrupted. How is that possible? Your earlier briefings suggested humanity had studied every available Devourer engagement. We did, Murphy replied. But the Devourers we fought a century ago were scouts, forward elements. What we're facing now are command-level forces. They've had 3,000 years to think about their defeat. They're not making the same mistakes. She pulled up tactical data showing Devourer ship movements. They're targeting our supply lines, avoiding direct confrontation with our capital ships, and they're trying to reach inhabited worlds to use civilian populations as shields. The room erupted in panicked chatter, various languages and translation overlays creating a cacophony of fear. Professor Khalith, who had been appointed as the Institute's liaison to Earth Defense Command, raised her tentacles for silence. Commander Murphy, what do you need from us? Murphy's eyes locked onto the camera. We need every civilian ship out of the combat zones. Now. We can't fight effectively while protecting refugees. We need the Deltharian Trade Federation to open their jump gates for emergency evacuations. We need the Vrexian Science Fleet to help us predict Devourer movement patterns. And we need the Korathi construction guilds to start building defensive platforms around populated worlds. That will take months, a Korathi representative chittered. We don't have the resources for such massive construction projects. You have 3 weeks, Murphy said flatly. That's how long until the Devourers break through our lines if we can't thin their numbers. After that, they'll reach the inner colonies. The death toll will be in the hundreds of billions. The silence that followed carried the weight of civilizations facing extinction. Amanda watched the representatives process the information. Some species responded with determination, others with despair. A few looked to humanity with something uncomfortably close to worship. That was dangerous. Humans weren't saviors. They were just the ones who had been ready. A message pinged on Amanda's datapad, private channel. She opened it and found herself facing her uncle, Colonel David Pierce, her grandfather's son, one of the architects of Earth's defense fleet. His face carried scars from the Battle of Kepler Station 40 years ago. Burns that regenerative medicine could have fixed, but that he kept as reminders. Annie, he said, using the childhood nickname only family employed, I need you to do something for me. Something that's going to make you uncomfortable. Amanda stepped away from the main group, finding a quiet corner. What do you need? Her uncle's expression hardened. We're winning the tactical engagements. But strategy is another matter. The Devourers are trying to find Earth. They've been probing our communication networks, tracking our ship movements. They want to hit us at home. Cut off the head and the body dies. Amanda's blood went cold. Is Earth prepared? As prepared as we can be, David replied. But here's the problem. The Galactic Institute has Earth's coordinates in their central database. So does every embassy. Every trade mission, every diplomatic vessel. The information is everywhere. And we have reason to believe the Devourers have infiltrators. That's impossible, Amanda said. Devourer biology is distinct. They can't disguise themselves as other species. Not Devourer infiltrators, David corrected. BCs they've compromised. We've intercepted communication suggesting they've been using some form of biological control. Parasites, maybe. Or neural manipulation. The point is, we can't trust anyone who's been in the dead zone and come back. Amanda understood where this was going. You want me to identify compromised individuals at the Institute? Her uncle nodded. You're our only asset in position. We need you to look for behavioral anomalies. People asking questions about Earth's location, anyone showing unusual interest in human military deployments. She could see him hesitate before continuing. And Annie, if you find someone compromised, you need to neutralize them. We can't risk Earth's location reaching the Devourer command structure. Amanda had known this might be required. She had received basic combat training. Like all humans born after the first Devourer attack, Earth's government mandated it. Every citizen needed to be able to defend themselves and others. But knowing how to fight and actually having to do it were different things. Still, she nodded. Understood. Send me the behavioral profiles. The data arrived seconds later. Amanda scanned through psychological markers. Unusual interest in Earth culture. Questions about human anatomy. Attempts to access restricted databases. The profiles also included physiological signs. Elevated stress hormones. Irregular sleep patterns. Aggressive behavior that didn't match baseline personality assessments. She returned to the main group as Commander Murphy finished her briefing. The representatives dispersed to their respective channels to coordinate the evacuation and defense efforts. Professor Kelleth approached Amanda, her tentacles forming a gesture of gratitude. Your species has saved us all, Miss Pierce. I cannot express adequate appreciation. We haven't saved anyone yet, Amanda replied. The war is just beginning. Over the next several hours, Amanda observed the Institute's staff and visiting dignitaries. Most showed normal stress responses. Fear was universal when facing extinction. But a few individuals stood out. A Deltharian trade minister who kept asking about human colony locations, a Vrexian scientist who requested detailed files on Earth's defensive capabilities, and a Fenari diplomat who had survived the Dead Zone's expansion by hiding in a cargo container for 6 days without food or water. Possible, but unlikely given Fenari metabolism. Amanda compiled her observations and sent them to her uncle. His response was immediate. The Fenari diplomat is flagged. Intelligence suggests he was captured briefly before escaping. Proceed with extreme caution. If he's compromised, the parasite might fight to preserve itself. The warning came too late. Amanda turned to find the Fenari diplomat standing directly behind her. His fur pattern showed calm, but his eyes showed something else, something cold and calculating that didn't match any Fenari emotional state. His hand moved toward his diplomatic pouch. Amanda reacted on instinct. Years of combat training took over. She grabbed his wrist before he could draw whatever weapon he carried. They struggled. The diplomat's strength was wrong. Fenari weren't physically imposing, but this one fought with intensity that suggested chemically enhanced muscles, enhanced by something that didn't care about the host body's limitations. Security forces converged on their location, but Amanda couldn't wait for backup. She used a joint lock technique that should have immobilized the diplomat. Instead, he twisted in ways Fenari physiology shouldn't allow. Bones broke. He didn't react to the pain. That confirmed it. Parasite control. The host was already dead or dying. The thing controlling him just didn't know it yet. Amanda shifted tactics. Instead of trying to restrain him, she went for elimination. A strike to the throat. Not enough to kill a Fenari, but enough to damage the parasite if it was centralized in the host's respiratory system. The diplomat collapsed, choking. Black fluid leaked from his mouth. Not blood. Something else. Something that writhed and tried to escape the dying host. Security forces surrounded the body. One of them, a Vrexian with military markings, scanned the black fluid. His scales went transparent. Devourer biological agent. Designed to infiltrate and control host species. This individual has been dead for approximately 4 days. The parasite was piloting the corpse. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Institute. How many others were compromised? How deep did the infiltration go? Amanda's datapad lit up with messages from Earth Defense Command. More cases identified. More parasites found. The Devourers weren't just attacking from space. They were attacking from within. Professor Kelleth's voice carried through the communication system. Emergency protocol. All personnel report to medical screening. No exceptions. Anyone who has been in or near the dead zone within the last 30 days must be tested. She looked at Amanda with 3 of her 4 eyes. The 4th focused on the dead diplomat. You saved us from a catastrophe, Miss Pierce. That creature had access codes for the Institute's entire database, including Earth's coordinates. Amanda checked her datapad. Her uncle's message confirmed the worst. They found 17 more infiltrators across the galaxy, all eliminated. But we can't be sure we got them all. Earth's location might already be compromised. The fleet is repositioning to defend the home system. She looked up at the professor. We're going to need more help than I thought. Khalith's tentacles formed a gesture Amanda hadn't seen before. Absolute commitment. Whatever humanity needs, whatever it takes. The galaxy owes you a debt that can never be repaid. We will stand with you. Amanda wanted to believe it, but she had studied history. She knew how alliances worked. When the crisis passed, when the immediate threat was gone, the gratitude would fade. Humanity would go back to being the newcomers, the primitives who got lucky, but that was a problem for later. Right now, they had a war to win. The tactical displays showed the Devourer forces shifting, moving away from the defense perimeter, heading in a specific direction, toward Earth. The infiltrators had succeeded after all. The coordinates had been transmitted. And now the deadliest species in the galaxy was coming home. Part 5, the message from Earth Defense Command arrived at 0300 hours. Station time. Amanda hadn't slept in 2 days. None of the humans in the Institute had. They knew what was coming. Every tactical projection showed the same result. Devourer forces would reach Earth's solar system within 72 hours. And despite humanity's preparations, despite 60 years of constant vigilance, the numbers weren't good. Commander Kate Murphy's face appeared on the emergency broadcast channel. Her exhaustion had deepened into something darker. This is a general alert to all human personnel and allied forces. The Devourer primary fleet has broken through our forward positions in Sector 12. We inflicted heavy casualties. 64 enemy capital ships destroyed. But they have numbers we didn't anticipate. Current estimates suggest they're bringing 800 vessels against Earth. We have 219 combat-ready ships in position. The math was brutal. Even with superior technology, even with decades of preparation, Earth was outnumbered nearly 4-1. Amanda watched the tactical display showing the approaching swarm. Each red dot represented a ship capable of harvesting entire planets. 800 of them, moving in coordinated attack patterns that suggested a level of strategic thinking that made her blood run cold. Professor Kelleth entered the observation room where Amanda had been watching the displays. The Vrexian scales showed colors Amanda had never seen. Not fear, determination. Alongside her came representatives from 18 other species. They had been meeting privately. Now they approached Amanda with unified purpose. "Miss Pierce," Khalith began, "we have reached a decision. The galactic community cannot stand by while humanity faces extinction defending us. We are mobilizing every available vessel, military and civilian. We are coming to Earth's defense." Amanda wanted to feel grateful, but she knew the reality. What you're describing is suicide. Your ships aren't built for combat. They don't have the weapons or armor to face the Devourers. You'll be sending your people to die. Then we die. A Korati representative chittered. Humanity stood alone when the first Devourer scouts came. You could have run. Could have hidden. Instead, you fought. You built a defense fleet in secret. You prepared for a threat that might never return. You did this knowing the galaxy might never appreciate the sacrifice. The translator conveyed fierce determination. Now it is our turn. We will not let you stand alone. The other representatives echoed the sentiment. Fenari, Deltharian, Vrexian, Tellurian. Species that had spent millennia avoiding conflict. Species that had built civilizations on principles of peace and cooperation. All of them willing to throw themselves into a war they had no training for. All of them willing to die for a species they had only known for 6 decades. Amanda pulled up the tactical data. If you're serious about this, we need to use your ships intelligently. Civilian vessels can't engage Devourer capital ships directly, but they can run interference, draw fire, create chaos in their attack formations. She highlighted several positions. Earth Defense Command has been planning contingencies. If we can force the Devourers to split their forces, if we can make them divide their attention, our combat ships can exploit the gaps. A Deltharian trade minister studied the formations. You're asking us to be bait, to sacrifice our ships so your military can strike. Yes, Amanda said bluntly. I won't lie to you. Most civilian vessels won't survive the engagement. The crews who volunteer for this are going to die. The Deltharian's bioluminescent patterns flickered through several colors before settling on one that translated as fierce resolve. Then, we volunteer. My people understand sacrifice. We will do what must be done. The next 24 hours became a blur of coordination. Civilian vessels from across the galaxy converged on Earth's solar system. Thousands of them. Trade ships, colony vessels, personal yachts. Anything with a faster-than-light drive, they came knowing they would die. They came because humanity had stood in the gap when no one else could. Now was their turn. Amanda found herself aboard the Avalanche as it took up position near Earth's orbital defense platforms. Commander Murphy gave her a brief nod of recognition before turning back to the tactical displays. The civilian fleet was positioning itself in a wide arc beyond Mars. Humanity's combat vessels formed a tighter defensive sphere around Earth itself. And on the planet's surface, every defense installation that had been built over the last century came online. The Devourers arrived exactly on schedule, 800 ships, each one a nightmare of biological engineering and predatory efficiency. They entered the solar system near Neptune and began their acceleration toward Earth. Their formation was perfect. Textbook invasion pattern designed to overwhelm defenders through sheer numbers and coordinated fire. Then the civilian fleet attacked, or rather, they did something the Devourers hadn't anticipated. They scattered. Thousands of ships moving in seemingly random directions. Some headed toward the Devourer fleet. Others fled at angles that made no tactical sense. The formation was chaos. Beautiful, deliberate chaos. The Devourer command structure tried to adapt. They had evolved to hunt species that fled in panic. Their tactics relied on predicting escape routes and cutting off retreat. But this wasn't retreat. This was a new kind of warfare. Bait that didn't behave like bait. prey that refused to follow the rules. 300 Devourer ships broke formation to pursue what looked like fleeing civilian vessels. The moment they separated from the main fleet, Earth's combat vessels struck. Kinetic weapons accelerated to impossible speeds, nuclear devices delivered with surgical precision, and weapons that humanity had developed specifically for this engagement. Weapons derived from studying Devourer biology for a century. Amanda watched as the Avalanche and 12 other human ships tore through the separated Devourer force. The engagement lasted 47 minutes. By the end, 293 Devourer ships were destroyed. Earth lost 6 combat vessels and over 800 civilian ships. The casualties were horrific, but the tactical victory was undeniable. The main Devourer fleet regrouped. They had learned they wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. But they had also learned something else. That the galaxy had changed. That prey species had become something else. Something dangerous. Commander Murphy's voice carried across the fleet communication channel. All vessels, prepare for final defensive positions. This is what we trained for. This is what humanity has been ready for since the first Devourer died above Mars. We will not surrender. We will not retreat. We will defend Earth. We will defend the galaxy. And we will remind these things why their ancestors learned to fear us. The final engagement began at the asteroid belt. The remaining 500 Devourer ships pushed forward with renewed aggression. They understood now that this wasn't going to be an easy harvest. That humanity and its allies would make them pay for every meter of space. Human combat vessels met them with weapons that had been refined through decades of preparation. Each shot calculated, each maneuver designed to maximize damage while minimizing exposure. And behind the human ships, the surviving civilian vessels provided support. Sensor data. Communication relays. Emergency rescue operations for damaged human vessels. The battle raged for 6 hours. The space between Mars and Earth became a graveyard of ships from a dozen species. The Devourers fought with the efficiency that had made them apex predators for millennia. But they were fighting an enemy that had been preparing for this moment for a century, an enemy that had built its entire defense strategy around this single engagement. Amanda operated one of the Avalanche's weapons stations. She had minimal training, but in the chaos of battle, every hand was needed. She watched targeting data flow across her screen, watched Devourer ships die, watched human ships sacrifice themselves to protect Earth, watched species that had never known war learn its terrible lessons in real time. A Fenari colony ship took a direct hit from a Devourer weapon. The vessel split in half, but as it died, its crew used the last of their power to ram the enemy ship that killed them. Both vessels vanished in a flash of nuclear fire. The translator carried the Fenari captain's last words across the fleet channel. For humanity. For the galaxy. For the future. That sacrifice became the pattern. Civilian ships turned themselves into weapons. Not because they were ordered to, but because they understood what was at stake. If Earth fell, the Devourers would regain their momentum. They would sweep across the galaxy. Every species would face the same choice: fight or be harvested. By the time the battle reached Earth's orbital defenses, the Devourer fleet had been reduced to 117 ships, still enough to devastate the planet. Still enough to kill billions, but not enough to win. The orbital platforms opened fire, weapons that had been built into asteroid bases, missiles launched from the moon, and the remaining human combat vessels pressed their advantage. The Avalanche took heavy damage, half her weapons offline, life support failing in 3 sections. But Commander Murphy kept fighting. She maneuvered her crippled ship directly into the path of a Devourer capital ship that was heading for Earth's atmosphere. The collision was spectacular. Both ships destroyed, but the trajectory was altered. The Devourer ship burned up in Earth's atmosphere instead of crashing into a populated continent. Amanda barely had time to process Murphy's sacrifice before the tactical situation demanded her attention. The Devourers were in full retreat. The survivors, less than 30 ships, were burning their engines to escape the solar system. Human vessels pursued, not to show mercy, but to ensure none of them carried information back to whatever command structure remained. When the last Devourer ship died near Jupiter, the communication channels erupted in celebration. Victory. Against impossible odds. Against the deadliest species in galactic history. But Amanda couldn't celebrate. Not yet. She pulled up the casualty reports. Over 40,000 human military personnel dead. 106 combat vessels destroyed or critically damaged. And the civilian fleet. 3,800 ships lost. Nearly 2 million sentients from across the galaxy. Professor Kellis' transmission came through on a private channel. Her scales showed colors of grief and pride. We won, Miss Pierce. But the cost. Amanda looked at the tactical display showing the debris field. Ships from species that had only known peace for millennia, now scattered across Earth's solar system. A graveyard of beings who chose to stand between predators and prey. I know, but they died defending something. That matters. The professor was quiet for a moment. What happens now? Now we rebuild, Amanda replied. We salvage what we can. We honor the dead, and we make sure this never happens again. She paused, thinking about her grandfather, about the soldiers who fought in darkness, about the species that had just learned the terrible price of survival. The Devourers came back after 3,000 years. Next time, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a threat we can't even imagine. But the galaxy has to be ready. Earth Defense Command transmitted new orders. Secure the system. Rescue survivors. Begin salvage operations. But there was another message embedded in the transmission, one that Amanda decoded with her private authorization. Protocol expansion authorized. Begin training allied forces in human defensive doctrine. Share technology. Build the coalition. Amanda understood what that meant. Humanity had been alone in its preparation. No longer. The galaxy had proven itself willing to stand together. Now they needed to teach everyone how to stand effectively. How to build defenses, how to recognize threats, how to survive in a universe that was far more dangerous than anyone had wanted to admit. She transmitted her acknowledgement and then looked at Earth through the avalanche's damaged viewports, the planet she had been defending, the home that had somehow survived another extinction event. People down there didn't know how close they had come. The media would sanitize it, call it a victory, celebrate the heroes. But Amanda and everyone else in the fleet knew the truth. They had won. But just barely. And next time they would need to be even more ready. Because the universe didn't give participation awards. It didn't care about courage or determination. It only cared about one thing: survival. And humanity, along with its new allies, had just proven they understood that lesson better than anyone else in the galaxy. The deadliest species wasn't gone. It had just been joined by others willing to fight. And together, they would face whatever came next. Not with certainty, not with guarantees, but with the same determination that had carried humanity through 100 extinction events. The determination that said no matter what the universe threw at them, they would survive, they would adapt, they would stand together, because that was the only way to win.